She was amazing. Just amazing. Those were the words Chaka Khan, one of the greatest R&B vocalists of all time, used to describe 14-year-old Whitney Houston the first time she heard her sing in a recording studio. Not good for her age, not has potential, not might be something someday. Amazing. Just amazing. This was 1977 or 1978. Whitney Houston was just a teenager from Newark, New Jersey. She had been singing in her church choir. She had been watching her mother, gospel singer Cissy Houston, work as a professional backing vocalist. But she had never stepped into a professional recording studio before, until Chaka Khan invited her. I was actually the first person she recorded with in the studio. She was 14, Chaka revealed in an interview with Vlad TV. Her mother was my main background woman when I did studio work. Cissy sang background on all my 80s stuff. One day in the studio, Cissy said to Chaka, "You know, I got a daughter." Chaka asked, "Can she sing?" Cissy's response, "She can really sing." And that simple conversation changed music history. Because when 14-year-old Whitney Houston stepped up to that microphone for the first time, Chaka Khan, who had heard thousands of singers, who had one of the most powerful voices in R&B, who knew talent when she heard it, was stunned. "I saw my younger self in her," Chaka later said, but could tell she was destined for greatness. This is the story of Whitney Houston's first recording session. The moment a legend recognized a future legend. The beginning of everything. If you're ready to discover what really happened, when 14-year-old Whitney Houston walked into that studio, what Chaka Khan heard that left her amazed, how this moment shaped Whitney's entire career, and why their connection lasted until Whitney's death in 2012. Hit that like button, subscribe and turn on all notifications because this story will give you chills. And drop a comment. How old were you when someone first recognized your talent? Because for Whitney, it was 14, and that recognition came from royalty. Let's go back to the late 1970s, to a recording studio, where greatness met greatness. To understand the significance of this moment, you need to understand who Chaka Khan was in the late 1970s. Chaka Khan, born Yvette Marie Stevens, was already a superstar. She had risen to fame as the lead vocalist of the funk band Rufus, delivering powerhouse performances on hits like Tell Me Something Good, 1974, Sweet Thing, 1975, and Ain't Nobody, 1983. But by 1978, Chaka was establishing herself as a solo artist. Her debut solo album, Chaka, was released in 1978 and featured the iconic single I'm Every Woman, a song written by Ashford and Simpson that would become a feminist anthem and one of the most recognizable songs in R&B history. Chaka Khan was known for her incredible vocal range, her emotional power, and her ability to blend funk, soul, R&B, and jazz into something uniquely her own. When Chaka Khan spoke about music, people listened. When she recognized talent, it mattered. And Chaka worked with the best musicians in the business. She was a perfectionist. She demanded excellence from everyone in the studio. One of the people she relied on was Cissy Houston. Cissy was part of the Sweet Inspirations, the legendary backing vocal group that had sung with everyone from Aretha Franklin to Elvis Presley. Cissy's voice was pristine, powerful, and technically flawless. Cissy sang background on all my 80s stuff, Chaka recalled. Her mother was my main background woman when I did studio work. They had developed a professional relationship built on mutual respect. Cissy knew what Chaka needed. Chaka trusted Cissy's musicianship completely. So when Cissy mentioned her daughter one day in the studio, Chaka was curious. Because if Cissy Houston had a daughter who could sing, really sing, Chaka wanted to hear her. Late 1970s. A recording studio in New York. Chaka Khan was working on new music. Cissy Houston was there as a backing vocalist, as she had been countless times before. During a break, Cissy mentioned her daughter to Chaka. One day she says to me, "You know, I got a daughter," Chaka recalled. This wasn't unusual. Musicians often talked about their families during downtime in the studio. But something about the way Sissy said it caught Chaka's attention. I said, "Can she sing?" Chaka remembered. Sissy's response was confident. "She can really sing. Not she's pretty good, not she's learning. She can really sing." Coming from Sissy Houston, a gospel legend who had performed with the greatest voices of her generation, that statement carried weight. Khan invited them both to the studio, and she became one of her backup singers along with her mother, sources confirm. Think about what that meant for 14-year-old Whitney Houston. She had been singing in church since age 11. She had been watching her mother work in professional studios. She had been learning technique, breath control, phrasing, all the fundamentals of great singing. But she had never actually recorded in a professional studio before. And now, Chaka Khan, one of the biggest names in R&B, was inviting her to sing. For most 14-year-olds, this would be terrifying. The pressure, the expectations, the fear of disappointing your mother, who had vouched for you, the fear of not being good enough. But Whitney Houston had something that went beyond training or technique. She had the gift. The day came when Whitney walked into that recording studio for the first time. Can you imagine what that must have felt like? The professional studio equipment, the musicians, the engineers, and Chaka Khan, a superstar, waiting to hear what you could do. Whitney was about to sing backing vocals alongside her mother, supporting Chaka's lead, blending with other voices, staying in the background. But when Whitney opened her mouth and sang, there was no staying in the background. What happened when 14-year-old Whitney Houston sang for the first time in a professional recording studio? Chaka Khan's reaction tells us everything we need to know. Whitney Houston was amazing, just amazing. Not good, not impressive for her age, not promising. Amazing. Chaka elaborated years later in interviews about what she heard that day and what she saw in young Whitney. "I saw my younger self in her," Chaka said, "but could tell she was destined for greatness." This is an extraordinary statement because Chaka Khan recognized something fundamental. Whitney Houston had the rare combination of technical skill, emotional depth, and natural presence that couldn't be taught. You either had it or you didn't. And Whitney, at 14 years old, had it. What specifically amazed everyone in that studio? According to sources, Whitney's voice was already showing the characteristics that would define her career. Clarity. Her tone was pure and crystalline, even at 14. No roughness, no strain. Just effortless beauty. Power. Whitney could hit notes with force when needed, but she also knew when to pull back. She had control that most professional singers spend decades developing. Range. Whitney's soprano voice could soar to incredible heights while maintaining perfect pitch and tone quality. Emotional intelligence. Whitney didn't just sing notes. She conveyed feeling. Even as a teenager, she understood how to connect emotionally with a lyric. Professionalism. Whitney had been raised in a professional environment. She knew studio etiquette. She took direction. She worked hard. Chaka Khan, who had performed with legends and who understood vocal excellence better than almost anyone, immediately recognized all of this. This wasn't just a talented kid. This was a future star. "I'm proud I gave Whitney Houston her break when she was 15, Chaka said in a 2017 interview with The Guardian. Note, different sources cite ages 14 to 15, but Chaka confirmed Whitney was very young, around 14, when they first worked together. But Chaka didn't just give Whitney a recording session and send her on her way. She recognized that Whitney needed guidance, mentorship, someone who understood the unique pressures of being a young black woman with an extraordinary voice in the music industry. And Chaka became that person. When Chaka Khan said, "I saw my younger self in her," she wasn't just making a casual comparison. She was recognizing specific qualities that connected her to Whitney. First, the church foundation. Both Chaka and Whitney had been raised with gospel music. That foundation gave them a depth of emotion and a technical command that secular training alone couldn't provide. Second, the challenge of being too much. Both women had voices that were almost overwhelmingly powerful. In a world that often wanted women to be quiet, delicate, and subdued, both Chaka and Whitney had voices that demanded attention. Third, the pressure of being young, talented, and black. Chaka understood what it was like to navigate the music industry as a young black woman with exceptional talent. The expectations, the stereotypes, the need to be twice as good to get half as far. Fourth, the gift and burden of greatness. Chaka recognized that Whitney's voice wasn't just good, it was generational. And gifts like that come with unique pressures and responsibilities. I could tell she was destined for greatness, Chaka said. This wasn't hope or optimism. It was certainty. Chaka knew, in that first studio session when Whitney was just 14, that this girl was going to change music. But Chaka also understood something else. Greatness comes at a cost. Years later, after Whitney's death in 2012, Chaka would reflect on what happened to her friend. She would talk about the pressures of fame, the lack of proper support systems, the industry that consumes its greatest talents. But in that moment in the late 1970s, when 14-year-old Whitney was singing backing vocals in a recording studio for the first time, the future was full of possibility. And Chaka Khan made sure Whitney understood something crucial. You have the gift. Don't let anyone diminish it. Don't let anyone make you smaller. Your voice matters. For a 14-year-old girl from Newark, hearing that from Chaka Khan must have been transformative. Chaka Khan didn't just give Whitney Houston her first recording session. She became a mentor and lifelong friend. After that initial session, Whitney continued working as a backing vocalist throughout her teenage years. She sang with her mother in clubs. She recorded with other artists like Michael Zager and Lou Rawls. But Chaka had planted a seed. You're not just a backing vocalist. You're a lead artist. By the time Whitney was discovered by Clive Davis in the early 1980s and signed to Arista Records in 1983, she had years of professional studio experience. She understood how to work with producers. She knew how to take direction. She had confidence in her abilities. And a significant part of that foundation was laid in that first studio session with Chaka Khan. In 1985, Whitney Houston's self-titled debut album was released and became a massive success. Hit after hit, Saving All My Love for You, How Will I Know, Greatest Love of All. Chaka watched Whitney's rise with pride. Then in 1992, something beautiful happened. Whitney was recording songs for the Bodyguard soundtrack, and she wanted to do a cover of Chaka Khan's iconic song, I'm Every Woman. Robin Crawford later claimed that Houston had long wanted to record one of Khan's songs and was convinced by Crawford to record it for the soundtrack. Sources confirm. Whitney's version of I'm Every Woman was released in January 1993. It became a massive hit, reaching number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100. But this wasn't just a cover. It was a tribute. Whitney's arrangement was different from Chaka's original. It was updated for the 1990s with house music influences. But Whitney made sure to honor Chaka by shouting her name near the end of the song. Chaka Khan, Chaka Khan, Chaka Khan. It was Whitney's way of saying, I remember where I started. I remember who believed in me first, and Chaka appreciated the gesture immensely. In 1999, Whitney and Chaka performed I'm Every Woman together at VH1 Divas Live 99. The two generations of greatness, teacher and student, mentor and mentee, sharing a stage, both belting out the song that connected them. It was a full circle moment. From that first studio session when Whitney was 14 and amazed everyone with her voice, to performing together as equals on one of music's biggest stages. But by the 2000s, Whitney was struggling. Her voice was damaged by years of drug use and smoking. Her marriage to Bobby Brown was tumultuous. The media scrutinized every aspect of her life, and Chaka watched with concern. understanding all too well how the industry could consume its greatest talents. On February 11th, 2012, Whitney Houston died at age 48. The news shocked the world. Tributes poured in from every corner of the music industry. But for Chaka Khan, the loss was deeply personal. This was the girl she had first heard at age 14. The voice that had amazed everyone in that studio. The future star she had mentored and believed in. Chaka spoke publicly about Whitney's death, and her words revealed complex emotions. In an interview with CNN's Piers Morgan on February 13, 2012, Chaka expressed frustration about Clive Davis's decision to continue his pre-Grammy party on the night Whitney died, with her body still in the building. "I thought that was complete insanity," Chaka said. But Chaka also reflected on what led to Whitney's death. Whitney being in LA. A full week before the party and having no one to supervise or insulate her from bad influences is what led to the singer's death, Chaka explained. She understood the pressures. She understood the lack of support. She understood how the industry failed Whitney. "I saw my younger self in her," Chaka had said years earlier. And in some ways, both women had fought similar battles. The struggle to maintain authenticity in an industry that wanted to package and control them. The challenge of living up to impossible expectations. The burden of being constantly watched and judged. But Whitney's story ended tragically. And Chaka had to live with the knowledge that the 14-year-old girl she had first heard in that studio, the one who was amazing, just amazing, was gone. Yet Chaka's pride in giving Whitney her first break never diminished. "I'm proud I gave Whitney Houston her break," Chaka said in 2017. Because that moment mattered. That first studio session when Whitney was just 14 years old, when Sissy said, "I have a daughter who can sing," when Chaka invited her to the studio and heard that busy, extraordinary voice for the first time. That moment was the beginning of everything. Whitney Houston went on to sell over 200 million records worldwide. She became one of the best-selling music artists of all time. Her voice influenced an entire generation of singers. But it all started with Chaka Khan saying, "Can she sing?" And then hearing the answer, not in words, but in that first note Whitney sang. Amazing. Just amazing. The story of 14-year-old Whitney Houston's first studio session with Chaka Khan teaches us something profound about recognition, mentorship, and belief. Chaka Khan didn't have to give Whitney Houston a chance. She could have politely declined when Sissy mentioned her daughter. She could have said, "Maybe when she's older." But Chaka listened. She invited Whitney to the studio. She heard that voice. And she recognized immediately what she was hearing. Greatness. And then, crucially, Chaka told Whitney what she heard. She didn't downplay it. She didn't diminish it. She didn't say, "You are good for your age." She said, "You're amazing. You're destined for greatness. I see myself in you." For a 14-year-old, hearing that from someone like Chaka Khan changes everything. It gives you confidence. It gives you permission to dream big. It gives you a sense that your voice, your gift, matters. Whitney Houston never forgot that first studio session. She never forgot that Chaka Khan believed in her before the world did. And when she had the chance to record "I'm Every Woman," she made sure to honor Chaka. This is what mentorship looks like at its best. Recognizing potential, creating opportunities, offering guidance, celebrating success, supporting through struggles. Chaka Khan did all of that for Whitney Houston. And while Whitney's story ended in tragedy, that first moment, when a 14-year-old girl walked into a studio and amazed everyone, that moment was pure magic. If this story moved you, do 3 things. 1. Hit that like button to honor both Chaka Khan and Whitney Houston, 2 legends whose connection started with belief and recognition. 2. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss stories about the moments that shaped music history. 3. Share this with someone who gave you your first break. Someone who believed in you before others did. Someone who said yes when they could have said no. Because we all need a Chaka Khan in our lives. And comment below, who gave you your first break? Who believed in you when you were just starting out? Chaka Khan heard 14-year-old Whitney Houston sing for the first time and said, "She was amazing, just amazing." She saw a future star. She recognized the generational talent. She gave Whitney her first professional recording session. And that moment, that simple act of belief, helped launch one of the greatest careers in music history. Rest in peace, Whitney Houston. You were amazing. Just amazing. Thank you, Chaka Khan, for recognizing greatness and giving Whitney her first break. That moment mattered more than you'll ever know.